So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions last night made headlines as they made a trade for a starting caliber wide receiver. The Detroit Lions sent a 6th-round pick to the New York Jets in exchange for Denzel Mims, as well as a 2025 7th-round selection. Now, of course, the picks being traded are not necessarily high-value picks, but the return for the Detroit Lions is a potential wide receiver one for the first 6 weeks of the 2023 NFL season, and a player to fill the X wide receiver role in the absence of Jameson Williams. So today I wanted to take a look at Denzel Mims, take a look at Denzel Mims as a prospect when he was coming out of Baylor, take a look at his NFL career so far, his ups, his downs, his strengths and weaknesses, and what he's bringing to the Detroit Lions, and of course, assessing the trade in a whole and in its entirety. So with that being said, let's start off with Denzel Mims as a prospect. Now, coming out of the University of Baylor, Denzel Mims was looked at as a top 50 pick and a borderline first-round wide receiver selection. Now, he was in a very strong draft class with CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy and a lot of other really good wide receivers who have turned out to have fairly good NFL careers so far, but Denzel Mims was looked at as arguably the most well-rounded wide receiver of the group, being a 6'3", 207-pound wide receiver with extreme physicality and incredible athletic gifts, having a 9.77 RAS score, running a 4.38 40-yard dash at the combine, as well as having a 38.5-inch vertical. Denzel Mims was looked at as one of the most athletically gifted wide receivers in his class, as well as being one of the more productive wide receivers out of the Big 12. In both 2017 and 2019, Denzel Mims had over 60 receptions on the year, over 1,000 yards, and over 8 touchdowns. And in his senior year, had over 66 yards, 1,100 yards, and 12 touchdowns on the season, while being one of, again, the best wide receivers in his respected draft class. Now, Denzel Mims ended up being drafted to the New York Jets in the 2nd round of the 2019 NFL Draft. He was a player that was expected to come in and be the wide receiver one for the New York Jets immediately, using his size, his route running, his ball skills, and his physicality to get open, create contested catch opportunities, and really elevate the offense and be kind of a DeAndre Hopkins-esque mold of a player that you can just throw it up to and have faith that he is going to go get it. Now, Denzel Mims is not just a jump ball wide receiver. In college, he showed the ability to create separation. He showed that vertical ability to stretch the field. He showed the ability to get behind defenders. He showed the ability to create separation on short yardage situations and run a fairly deep route tree for a player from the Big 12 that really didn't have the greatest quarterback play, really didn't have the greatest system around him to succeed. Denzel Mims was still one of the best players in the country at the position. Now, in the NFL, Denzel Mims has yet to really thrive. He had a great preseason, his rookie season, and really most of the preseason games he's played in has been really, really good, but he has yet to really break out in a regular season game. Throughout his 3 seasons as an NFL wide receiver, Denzel Mims has totaled just 92 targets, 42 receptions, 676 yards, has yet to receive a touchdown, but has averaged 16.1 yards per reception and has averaged a really good yards per catch, despite not having a large volume of receptions to his name yet in his NFL career. Now, some of this is on Denzel Mims. Some of this is the system that he fit into. Some of this is just his play style. But a majority, I think at least, of the reason that Denzel Mims has yet to succeed in the NFL is due to the quarterback play around him and the offensive system of the Jets as a whole. Now, last season, Denzel Mims had to play with Zach Wilson at quarterback, who then got benched for Mike White, who then got injured, leading to Joe Flacco being the starting quarterback. And despite all 3 quarterbacks playing a significant amount of time in the 2023 season, the 3 of them combined totaled 3,900 yards, meaning on average, these three QBs in a third of a season averaged about 1,300 yards together or as an individual, right? That is not good quarterback play. That is not ideal for a wide receiver, and especially for a wide receiver like Denzel Mims, who can stretch the field. Not having a quarterback that's one willing to take risks down the field, and two, not really being very good at taking those deep shots, not being very accurate down the field, it really wasn't a recipe for success. On top of that, the Jets are just more of a run first offense. They like to run behind Breece Hall. They like to run behind their strong offensive line, right? They couldn't really rely on the quarterback because none of their quarterbacks were particularly talented or particularly good in the 2023 season. And for what it's worth, Denzel Mims was the wide receiver for the New York Jets, but that doesn't mean a whole lot because the Jets wide receivers weren't very good, right? Yes, you have Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, as a rookie, put up 1,100 yards, was a really good player, played at a Pro Bowl caliber level, and I would argue is a top 15 to 20 wide receiver already in the NFL. But Corey Davis, a player that was a former top 5 pick in the NFL draft, a player that was good with the Titans but not great, only had 536 receiving yards because the Jets offense wasn't built for wide receivers, right? Elijah Moore also asked for a trade after having just 446 yards in his sophomore campaign, not having the production or the volume necessary for him to be a really good wide receiver in the NFL, despite him being a very talented wide receiver in the NFL. And then as your wide receiver four, you had Denzel Mims, a player that just didn't see the field because I don't think he fit what the Jets really liked. He wasn't drafted by Robert Saleh. He wasn't drafted by this NFL regime that's currently taking over the New York Jets. And I really don't think he fits what they wanted in a wide receiver, right? He's not an elite separator. He's not necessarily a player that is going to break wide open like Garrett Wilson, but he is a player more in the ballpark of a Corey Davis, right? A big, long wide receiver that can stretch the field, that can create separation underneath, but isn't going to create the amount of separation that Garrett Wilson creates, isn't going to create the same separation that Stephon Diggs is going to create or something like that, but isn't necessarily bad at getting open or stretching the field. It just so happened that the New York Jets signed Corey Davis to a decently sized contract in, I believe, Denzel Mims' second year as an NFL wide receiver, essentially taking that role away from Denzel Mims and leaving him with nothing left on the field and giving him nothing left to do in the offense, as Corey Davis essentially took all that role away from him, despite Denzel Mims showing some promise in his rookie year. Now, the Detroit Lions are getting a really young and I think fairly talented wide receiver. After trading just a 6th-round pick and receiving a 7th-round pick in return, the Detroit Lions are getting a 25-year-old wide receiver who stands at 6'3", 207, has the physicality to compete with NFL DBs, runs a 4.3 40-yard dash, averaged 16.1 yards per reception in his NFL career, and has really not broken out yet, but hasn't been in a system to break out. He is still young. He has not had any real injury concerns. He is a strong contested catcher. He's a strong field stretcher. He blocks really well and is at the very least a very willing blocker, which is something we know the Detroit Lions like on the offensive side of the ball. And I think he's going to really slide in very seamlessly to the DJ Chark role that we had for him a season ago, right? DJ Chark was the field stretcher. DJ Chark had 500 yards and I believe 3 touchdowns, and that is an attainable goal for Denzel Mims. And if you're trading a 6th-round pick for 500 yards and 3 touchdowns, that's good value for you getting a 25-year-old wide receiver that can do the same thing DJ Chark did for you a season ago, essentially not missing a beat and not having to really take a step back while losing that deep field stretcher. Right? DJ Chark left in free agency. He was a good wide receiver down the stretch for the Detroit Lions, and they weren't really able to replace him. Yes, they brought in Marvin Jones, but he's not really a field stretcher. He's more of an intermediate safety blanket, right? You have Khalif Raymond, but he's not really the 6'3" wide receiver that can go up and get the ball if it is a contested catch, right? You have, I think, Josh Reynolds, who is a really good wide receiver, but again, it doesn't really stretch the field like DJ Chark did. The Lions didn't have a bad wide receiving core, but they were missing that big body field stretcher, especially once Jameson Williams was out. Now they have their essentially DJ Chark for the first 6 weeks, and now they're going to have a guy who can play on the X, right? They're going to have a big body player that can stretch the field in a mold of an A.J. Brown, in the mold of a DK Metcalf, obviously not at the same level of those players, but in the same role as those players. And I think Denzel Mims can have a career year in Detroit looking for that extension. And even if he has a really good year, even if he gets 600 yards, he's not going to command large money. And you're going to get him for several years down the road without having to really give up a lot of capital for him, and probably, or at least likely, getting more production out of him than what a sixth round wide receiver would likely give you. Now, Denzel Mims, I'm not expecting him to be an elite wide receiver. I'm not even expecting him to be the number one option for the Detroit Lions in 2023, regardless of if Jameson Williams is on the field or not. But if Denzel Mims hits his ceiling, and his ceiling is still very high, mind you, he was a second round pick for a reason. He does have talent. I think in the right system can develop into a really good wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. The Detroit Lions, in the event that Denzel Mims hits his ceiling, they have a top 10 or top 15 receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot who creates separation, gets open, is a really, really good young wide receiver. They have Jameson Williams, arguably has the ceiling of the most explosive player in the NFL. And now they have Denzel Mims, a player that averages 16 yards per reception, is only 25 years old, and can be the traditional X wide receiver. That's a really good top 3 if they all hit their ceilings, as well as having Khalif Raymond, who's good for 500 to 600 yards a season, as well as having Josh Reynolds, who's good for 400 to 500 yards a season, as well as having Tom Kennedy and Antoine Green, who are really good young wide receivers to lean on with depth. The wide receiving core might not have an elite X wide receiver, right? They might not have a DK Metcalf. They might not have a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase, but they do have a really good, young, and deep wide receiver room, even in the absence of Jameson Williams. And I think this trade is going to open up a lot of things on the offense. I think that even throughout minicamp, Ben Johnson saw that they don't really have that field stretcher without Jameson Williams. So Brad Holmes said, okay, let's go take a risk on a 25-year-old kid, a player with really high upside, a kid that has not really been in a position to thrive, but at the very least we know can be a big play threat, is a strong blocker, and can develop into a really, really good wide receiver down the road to fill the X wide receiver position that they've been trying to fill for years. It started off with Tyrell Williams, who unfortunately suffered a concussion and wasn't able to play in 2021. It was DJ Chark last year in 2022, left for Carolina after having a fairly good season and getting really good wide receiver money. Now, third time's the charm. Hopefully, it's 25-year-old, 6'3", 4.3 speed Denzel Mims to fill that role for a long period of time. But with all that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this trade. How do you feel about the value? How do you feel about the player? Do you think that Denzel Mims can be the X wide receiver for a long period of time? Or do you think this is going to be another one and done X wide receiver and the Lions are going to look to replace him yet again in the 2024 offseason? I'd be very curious to hear what you guys think and how you feel about this trade. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.